This is Captain John. Good morning. It's 5 a.m. Where have you been? Today I'm in one of the most picturesque spots I've been to in a long time. And this is a spot that many of us have hardly ever even heard about, let alone thought about coming to visit. Now that might be a mistake. But today, me, you, and this camera, we're going to get educated. Let's go. We are in the Mariana Islands, Guam, and specifically Saipan. You can find beauty all over the world. It's not hard to find, but it's always nice to find those best-kept secrets. And the Marianas is definitely a best-kept secret. It's gorgeous, tropical, bathed in a rich history, and more importantly, very easy to get to. The Marianas are off the beaten path. That means you don't have the crowds to fight with as you do at some of the bigger resorts, but you still have the same amenities, all of that good stuff. So whatever your passion, you're going to find it here, and you're going to find it in great abundance. But before we dive into the Marianas, let me show you what it takes to move an airplane from A to B. And then stick around. We'll be back. Of all our common experiences, air travel has to be near the top. Yet for something that's been around for almost 100 years, it still remains a little bit of a mystery. Tonight I'm taking a flight from John F. Kennedy to Brussels, Belgium. So why don't you come along and get a little glimpse of my world. Every flight starts in the briefing room. About an hour and a half before we push back, we get together and talk about the flight. We map it out, look at the flight plan, check the weather, talk about contingencies, emergencies, how we want to fly the flight. Once we're satisfied and have a plan, we move out to the airplane, load the flight plan into the aircraft computers, and check the primary and backup systems. Make sure everything's operating as it should. And if there's a problem, let's get maintenance on board. We don't want any delays if we can help it. Terrain. It takes a staggering amount of people to move an aircraft today. Besides the flight crews and the gate agents, behind the scenes there are hundreds of people, all working together, coordinating. It's a pretty complex ballet that most times works pretty well. On the taxiway, air traffic control has us, and it's their job to sequence us in with everybody else who wants to go flying tonight. Cleared for takeoff, and now we start the most critical part of any flight. We've talked about the takeoff roll way back in the briefing room, and we know exactly what we have to see in order to take this aircraft airborne. As we roll down the runway, the instruments look perfect. 165 knots, and we're going flying. Once airborne, we hand the aircraft over to the autopilot system. This allows us to be heads up, to look outside the aircraft, as well as to monitor the aircraft systems. We all have our primary duties, but we also know each other's jobs, and that allows us to step in from time to time so that we can ensure that at least one guy always is watching the store. As the sun comes up, we begin to think about approach and landing. Flying modern jet aircraft today requires a lot more than just pilot skills. Moving at 8 miles a minute requires you to anticipate, to think ahead, to flight manage. And the one thing for certain, there are no two flights exactly alike. I love Denmark, but today we're flying the Slot, the 3-hour flight from Tokyo to Saipan. It's not uncommon to pick up weather on this route, but our equipment is really good at showing us just where to go. Through the storm and off to the left, we get our first glimpse of Iwo Jima and the history that this region has to offer. A landmass of only 8 square miles, but she certainly has had a lot to say. And before you know it, we're on final approach. Saipan, more history off to the right. Runway Able, where the Enola Gay took off. And if you don't know the Enola Gay, Google it. I've got 24 hours here on Saipan. I've never been here before. I am looking forward to exploring and discovering this island. Come on, come with me. Just 20 minutes from the airport is the Hyatt Regency Resort, and that's my first stop. After the 3-hour flight from Tokyo, the beautiful grounds certainly puts a smile on my face. I could have spent all day here on my balcony just taking in this tropical paradise. But my first stop was right outside the hotel's front door. The American Memorial Park. This is where we honor the U.S. Marines and soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice during the Battle of Saipan in World War II. I gotta tell you, as an American and as a Marine, I'm a little bit angry. I mean, this is a national park, and it's here to honor all those killed in action, missing in action, all those sacrifices in the Battle of Saipan. I mean, we're talking Gettysburg numbers. It was huge. These flies are miserable. But as a national park, and especially as one that the subject is to honor those who sacrificed, it's in disrepair. Come on, guys, at least cut the grass. Throw some money out here. Is it really too much to ask just to pull a weed every now and then? When I left my room, it was clear. Now the clouds were forming, and what that means, a little sprinkle. And after the little sprinkle, the huge downpour. Needing somewhere to go, I dived into the nearest bakery for a little morning nourishment. Unfortunately, the baker must have been out that day. Everything was in a wrapper. That didn't stop me. I got my Paris croissant and some European coffee, I thought. The rain was over as soon as it started, and now I had to find transportation. Finding a place to rent you something to get around the island, that's not hard. The hard part is deciding what you want to do. Scooters? Motorcycles? You can rent a Harley Davidson. I thought about it for a second, but I decided on going with a rental agency that had a Harley Davidson sticker.
In transit? What do you mean? Yeah, in transit, yeah.
Yeah, inside full cover 15, 15.
15 what?
Yeah, different, separate.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue what I just agreed to. But the guy did the right things. He checked my license, I signed the right papers, and before you know it, I'm going mobile. My choice is the car. And I did it for 2 reasons. Number 1, air conditioning. It gets hot here. And number 2, nobody looks good in a bicycle helmet. The impending flat tire and maintenance required lights, that's what's $50 a day gets you. But hey, where's your sense of adventure? I start by heading south to Green Beach. That's my first stop. The 15th of June, 1944, Saipan. $70,000 U.S. Marines and soldiers would come ashore. On the island, 30,000 Japanese soldiers and 22,000 civilians. The Battle of Saipan had begun. These are the actual landing beaches of the 2nd Marine Division on Saipan. Right now, it's a resort.
But on 15th of June, 1944, 20,000 men came ashore right here. And they would have liked to have been anywhere else but here. It's hard to imagine what it would have been like to land on that beach, to look down to your left and to your right. Your friends, the equipment, the smell, the noise. If you looked out into the ocean, there would have been hundreds of ships. Right now, this moment, it was so easy to transcend time, to be back, to experience what those soldiers experienced. History wasn't black and white anymore. It was in color, and it was in front of me. I could experience it. I could smell the aromas, feel the breeze. I was there. This really is spectacular. You know, I think I'm going to take a moment here. Maybe two. The Marines and soldiers fought for every inch, and that fighting was brutal, savage. From day one, every soldier knew they had to take the high ground, and on Saipan, the high ground is Mount Tapacho. Mount Tapacho is about 475 meters high. It's about 1,550 feet. Don't give up on the road. Just keep on trekking, because when you get to the top, that view makes it worth it. You can learn a lot about the battle from this vantage point. There's lots of markers and writings in different languages on what you're seeing and where. Of course, everybody wants to get their picture taken on top of the mountain. And why not? It's gorgeous. But for the soldiers and Marines in 1944, they still had a ways to go. Facing a very brave and determined opponent, the Marines slowly, cave by cave, inched north. And as the Marines moved north, they soon began to encounter civilians. Some would surrender, and some would not. The Marines fought cave to cave until finally they came upon the last command post. It still stands today, of the Japanese commander. Remnants of the battle are still there today, and they surround the command post. Tanks and guns are just testament of the fierce fighting that went on. The command post is as it was on that final day in 1944. The walls still show the scars of the battle. There's not much to physically see, but like Green Beach, it's a place where you just get a feeling. Come here and check this out. GI Pringles. Like Green Beach, the last command post is a place of reflection. There are memorials all around, not only for the soldiers, but also for the civilians. On the very tip of Saipan sits Banzai Cliff. As the Marines moved north, the civilians who chose not to surrender and the defenders were running out of room. They had nowhere else to go. And it was here on this cliff, by the sea, that they made their final decision. As the Marines stood by helplessly, thousands of civilians began to leap off these cliffs into the rocky and treacherous waters below. Men, women, children, entire families chose this fate. And it was not just here. It was happening elsewhere. on a place known as Suicide Cliff. There are times on Saipan where you think you're the only person on the island. And as I drove up to Suicide Cliff, I certainly had that feeling. The wind is a constant presence up here, and the memorials similar to what you just saw down at Bonsai Cliff. Once again, you can transport yourself back in time. I don't think I'm the only person who's ever stood here on these cliffs and looked down on the valley below and wondered what it must have been like. Bandero Trail, just to the left on top of Suicide Cliff. One of the many trails on Saipan. Feel free to hike, but just be careful. More on him later as we venture over to Tinian. Unless you have your own boat, you're going to get to Tinian by air. It's a 12-minute flight from Saipan, and Dan, my co-pilot, and I decided to go over and see what it was all about.
Hey, how's it going? Good. Name's Dan.
I gotta admit it was kind of fun. We don't get to fly the little planes all that much. Dan and I were not gonna come this far and not see Tinian. As we touched down, our first order of business was getting a rental car. That wasn't a problem. We were first in line.
I'll tell you what, man, this
We
is
were the only ones in line.
Definitely.
Soon we were on Broadway. It's the road right outside the airport. It's the original from 1944. And it slowly deteriorates. But the roads are all good. They're all passable. Don't be afraid. Seriously, they're good. There are many original Japanese army buildings on the island for you to explore.
Wonder what they had on these overhead rails, buddy.
Feel free, have fun, but be careful. Remember my friend on Saipan? He's everywhere.
You go first. Wake him up for you. Yeah, you get the spiders out of the way first.
Captain John doesn't like spiders, but I do like old buildings and history.
Pacific.
Yeah.
And it is everywhere.
Oh, I'm sure they did a lot of research out here.
Right.
And like on Saipan, there are memorials to honor the sacrifices, but again, pretty much in the same condition I found them there. But the main attraction on Tinian is North Field, the beginning of the atomic age. These revetments are where the first atomic bombs were loaded onto B-29s before they took off for Japan. You can get in your car and drive down the exact taxiways before the jungle takes them over. You can turn on the runways. They're still there. And if you do all of this, you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to make a takeoff roll. Just be sure and stop. We have done a ton today. Now it's time to go back to Saipan and get ready for work tomorrow. And as I taxied out for takeoff the next morning, I couldn't help but look back at everything I had seen. Some things I haven't even gotten to yet. This place is special. This place is not what you expect. And this place for sure is one that I'm glad I came to. So if you're ever 3 hours south of Japan, you know, in the neighborhood, stop by the Marianas, Guam, Saipan. I think you're going to like it.